So the topic for tonight is try to work on the halachos of Geneivas Daas. Um, Geneivas Daas means Geneva means stealing. Das means knowledge. So stealing one's knowledge, really, literally what it means. But really, what it means is deceiving someone, right? Deception, an act of deception of another person. The act of deceiving another person, where the only result is their das, meaning you're not stealing from them monetarily, you're not causing them to lose money in any way, get an item that's really worse than what they paid for, etc. Nothing monetary that was a problem, but there was deception. It was an act of deception. So the Gemara phrases that assur, that prohibition, as Geneivas Daas. It has a big sugya about it here in the Gemara in Chulan and Tzadi Dalad. So I'll try to go with one of his students, and they needed to cross the river. The way they would do was some type of ferry. There were people that had ferry services, and they would charge. And for the way that he paid the ferry driver, who happened to be a guy who was not Jewish, and the Gemara says, what did he do wrong? I mean, he paid him for it. So the Gemara says that the ferry driver, thought that he gave him a chicken as his payment. He gave him some chicken meat. That's what he gave him as his payment. And he thought that he was buying it from a Jew. So he thought he was getting kosher chicken. And we see in the Talmud that at least in that time, maybe now it's maybe true also, I'm not sure. But even non-Jews who are not commanded on keeping kosher, sometimes they preferred kosher meat, and they consider it a more higher quality. And Shmuel was upset that his Talmud paid, that his student paid in this way, that the ferry driver was deceived. And the Gemara says that we learn from there, Shmuel is teaching us that assur lignov das abrios, it's assur to deceive another person, vafilu daito shogai, even a non-Jew. So we know that there are certain matters that we have a greater responsibility between one Jew and another Jew. Different areas of halacha. We have ribis and onah, right, usury and prices and things like that, prices of different items, and when it comes to this, when it comes to deception, the Gemara learns out that this is assur for everyone, even if there's no monetary loss. So the Gemara then goes through a bunch of other cases. So let's try to go through some of them. One of them is a person who invites someone over and knows that person is not going to accept the invitation. So they're pushing them to come over, come to us for a suda, come for a meal, and they know that this person that they're talking to, he's trying to get to come. He's not going to come. He just wants to make it like he's so generous to him, like he's so nice to him. He really doesn't want to have him, but he knows this guy's either going to be out of town, or he doesn't go out, or he has this issue, whatever it is, and he pressures him to come. So the Gemara says that is an example of Geneivas Daas, and that is prohibited because of Geneivas Daas. A second case is that the Gemara says Lo Yarblo B'Tikrovis Yodei Shein Makabel. He knows that he tries to bring this guy in, give him certain things that he knows the other person's not going to receive. A third case, the Gemara brings Lo Yiftach Lo Chavios Hamachuros Lechambani Elam Kein Hodiu. So the Gemara talks about what it used to be, that they had barrels of wine that were psuchos. They had a special they were chasumas with a special seal. They were sealed in order to keep them fresh, similar to what we have similar to what we have today. While it's sealed and with the cork and everything before it's open, it could last and get better. And the wine gets better with age. Once it's open, it's on its way out. So it was like that, but maybe even quicker to get to go bad. And a barrel was maybe a more significant thing. And the Gemara is talking about that someone comes, a person has a guest over, and he wants to show the guest that that he values him so much. So he opens up a barrel, fresh barrel of wine for his guest. Now, that's considered a very significant thing because everyone knew that once, after a day or two, this wine is going to start to go. And if he doesn't have someone to buy the rest of his barrel, then it's going to waste. So it's only something someone would do as really an act of showing that he holds of his guest as so important to him, as so chashuv. So the Gemara says, so this guy, he already made a deal. He made a deal. Let's say his barrel, let's say is a gallon of wine. He found someone that needs 80% of a gallon, and is ready to buy it tomorrow. He found the buyer. Someone's making a party. They need 80% of a gallon. He's going to go tomorrow, open up, pour it into the guy's house for his party, and he's great. And meanwhile today, so he knows everything. He knows he's covered. He knows nothing's going to go to waste. He knows that he could open it up, and the rest of it is going to be taken care of. But he opens it up as if he's opening it special for his guest. He opens it special for his guest, that his guest is not informed. He doesn't inform him that really the rest of his bottle is sold, so he's not worried about losing anything on it, and implies that he holds him as such a prestigious guest that he would open up a whole bottle for him. So the Gemara says that is also a classic example of Geneivas Daas. He would have to tell him. Now on this, the Gemara asks a question, because there was a story that one of the Amoraim, Ula, went to the house of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda had this exact case. Rabbi Yehuda had sold the rest of his barrel to someone else, and Ula came, and he went ahead and opened it up for Ula and gave him, and didn't say anything about it. So the Gemara asks, how could Rabbi Yehuda do this? How could Rabbi Yehuda do this exact case, which the Brisa tells us is assur? So the Gemara gives two answers. One answer, Udi oide. He told him. He said, I'm giving you I'm opening it up. Don't think I'm losing out. I have the rest of it sold for tomorrow. That's one answer. The Gemara gives a second answer. Shaini ula de chaviv leila Rav Yehuda de belav hachi nami psuche miftachle. The Gemara gives a second answer that Rav Yehuda, the host, he held so highly of his guest Ula, that he would have done it anyway. It happened to be that he had sold the rest of his wine, so he wasn't going to lose. But he was certain, he knew that this person, if Ula comes to him, he would just want to show the utmost matters of signs of respect, of signs of how prestigious, how highly he held of him, and he would have done it anyway. So the Gemara here seemingly teaches us an important heter, which we'll get back to. It's an important leniency when it comes to Geneivas Daas, is if you would have done it anyway, and even if you really weren't losing, then it's still permissible. Let's see a few more cases. The Gemara says that you may not sell someone a sandal shomesa b'chal shochayu. So they would make their sandal, their shoes, make them out of leather. And at the time there was a difference between a leather that was made from an animal which was slaughtered and a leather that was made from an animal which was just found dead as a carcass. So apparently there would be some difference in the quality of leather. So the Gemara says for one to sell it as if it is a leather from a slaughtered animal, and it's really just a dead carcass animal, that would also be assur because of Geneivas Daas. Now the question over here is, why is that Geneivas Daas? That's real. Seemingly, that's real monetary theft, right? You sell someone a product as if it's a higher quality product, and it's really a lower quality product, right? You sell someone a good pair of shoes, and it's really a low quality pair of shoes. You sell someone high speed internet, and it's really low speed internet. You have yourself a problem, right? A monetary issue over here. It's not a Geneva. It's not just that you're deceiving the person. So the Maharsha asks this question, and he says that the Gemara must be talking about a case that there's no monetary loss, because you really didn't even charge him for the higher quality. You charged him lower. You charged him for the lower quality, so he didn't pay anything extra, and really he got exactly what he paid for, and there was no monetary loss. And nevertheless, it's assur because of an act of deception, and this really opens up a whole category of Geneivas Daas. Many cases, which I don't know if we'll be able to go into that tonight, but many cases where you're selling something to someone and there is some type of there's some type of defect or something that is low quality, something inferior about the item that you're selling that really does not make an impact on the price, or your price is already low enough that you're not charging any extra despite that, but still the covering up of a defect or the act of implying that something is higher than it is, right? To think that a person's getting a good deal, right? If you say, you're getting this for 20% less than everyone pays on it, right? And really it's only 10% less than everyone pays on it. So monetarily, you didn't do anything wrong, right? The guy actually got a good deal. He got a 10% discount. But you made him feel like he's getting a 20% discount, right? Monetarily, you didn't steal anything from me. You didn't get anything that you shouldn't have gotten. You actually took the worst end of the deal. But you exaggerated on the deal and you deceived him thinking that he's getting a higher level deal. That's when it comes into the category of Geneivas Daas. The Gemara then tells us another story where the great Amora Mar Zutra was traveling out of his hometown, and he was a very, very prominent rabbi, and Rava and Rav Safra, another group of great rabbis, younger rabbis, were traveling home. And Rav Safra's they were traveling in opposite directions. So Mar Zutra is entering into city A, and they're going from city A to city B, and they encounter each other on the road. And Mar Zutra sees these younger scholars coming towards his direction as he enters into the new city, the new destination, and he figures that they're there as a reception. They're coming to welcome him to the city. These great rabbis came, and they were coming out. They heard that Mar Zutra was coming, and that's what Mar Zutra assumed. He thought that they were coming to greet him. Really, they were just traveling to a different city. They didn't even know that Mar Zutra was on his way. So Mar Zutra says to them, "Young rabbis, you didn't have to. You came out all the way here to greet me, to give me a Kabbalah's punim, to receive me here." Says, why'd you? I wouldn't want you to put in so much efforts. So Rasafra, one of the other rabbis, said back to him, he was worried about deceiving Mar Zutra. So he said, to be honest, we were just traveling to another city. But if we would have known, we would have come anyway. We would have done it. But to be honest, we weren't coming to greet you. So Rava said back to Rava was the other younger scholar that was traveling out of the city, and he said to Safra, "Why'd you say that to Mar Zutra? You pained him, right? You embarrassed him. He thought that we were coming out to be makshim, to show how important he was, and just let him think that. You should have let him think that. Now you pained him." So Rav Safra said back, "What do you mean? This is an explicit halacha, right? You're not allowed to fool someone." So I had to tell him. What was my choice? I had to tell him, right? So Rava says back, a very important principle. Rava says, "Ihuhu de kamati anafshe." He Mar Zutra, he fooled himself. You did not fool him. He fooled himself. Meaning to say that you did not do an act of deception. He made an assumption. And when somebody else makes an assumption, that is not your Geneivas Daas. Now we're going to have to qualify that and really go into what exactly is that answer saying. So Rashi, on the spot, Rashi says that right, he didn't ask what it was. So Rashi says, what are we going to do with the cases before? Rashi says, right, why don't we say, right, the case where I open up a barrel of wine for my new guest. So Rashi asks, why don't I say over there the same svara? I didn't tell him, seemingly, if I didn't go out of my way to deceive him. He made an assumption. He thought I was opening it for him. Really, I was opening it because I anyway had it sold. Same thing by the case of the sale of when Shmuel's Talmud back at the beginning, the student of Shmuel that paid the ferry driver, right, with that which was not kosher. Says, what's the problem? He assumed I was Jewish, so he assumed it was kosher. I didn't deceive him. He made an assumption, right? That's the question. How do you draw the line over here? When do you say he tricked himself? So Rashi says, fascinating thing. Rashi says, those cases are when the person said explicitly that he is giving him the other thing. For example, he said, I'm opening up, oh, what a great guest. I'm so happy you came. Let me open up a new barrel of wine for you. Or he said, oh, I'm so thankful for this, I want a ferry drive. I want a ferry ride. Here, I'll give you a nice kosher chicken. I'm a Jew, I'll give you a nice kosher chicken. Says Rashi, that's when it is assur.
Wouldn't that be pushing?
Oh, so that's a good question. Number one, wouldn't that be pasha? You're saying because,
especially if he's lying, like by the chicken, he's lying.
Right. So that's actually that seems to be a more basic question than the way Tosis asked it. Tosis kind of asked it like that. Tosis asked that, what do you mean? We had a story before with Ula and Rav Yehuda. Are you going to say that Rav Yehuda told him that he's opening it special for him even though he told him that it wasn't sold? Or are you going to say that that's really Tos's first question seems to really be what you're saying. He says like this. So the first question is, the Gemara tells us before that it's only assur if you do not tell him. So it sounds like the act of telling him is what makes it permissible. If you don't tell him and you just leave it to his assumption, it sounds like it's a problem. Same thing by Shmuel. So basically, Tosfos is very bothered by Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. It doesn't really sound like the other cases earlier. And following Tosfos, basically all of the Rishonim, the Ramban, the Rashba, and the Ritva, and the Rosh, everyone has a problem with Rashi over here, and there's a lot of work needs to be done to explain Rashi. It seems to be expressly against the Elam Keno deal. I think Chaim's question is a pretty basic question also. I don't see them really asking it like that. That it's really just straight up lying. That we're assuring then according to that. But the other Rishonim, and this is how it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, explain it like this. You have to determine in each case what should be assumed. What is considered a normal assumption and what is considered presumptuous. So that's how the Rishonim explain it, and they're machalik between all the different cases, right? It's not so common that I have 0.8 of my barrel sold out to someone else. If you're coming and I'm opening up a barrel for you, so there's no reason that they should assume that the rest of it is sold out, right? That's a more unique case. If a Jew has a butcher shop which generally sells kosher meat, right? And the non-Jew comes in, and the Jew says to himself, seemingly a good calculation. He says, well, okay, I'm selling to, when I sell to a Jew, I have to sell kosher because a Jew has to eat kosher. But the non-Jew, he doesn't have to eat kosher anyway. So what does it make a difference? So I'll just give him the treifa. I'll just give him the one that's not kosher. Right? So the non-Jew, how is he supposed to assume that he's getting something not kosher? He's going into a kosher butcher shop. So even if the Jew didn't tell him explicitly this is kosher meat, but the status quo, the thing that he should assume is that he's getting kosher meat. Right? In this case where the rabbis were going out of their city, why should Mar Zutra assume that they're coming to greet him? There's many reasons why a person can leave their city. There's no status quo. There was an assumption that was made. So this is how it comes out in Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Nasim, in Reish Chav Ches, that in each case you have to kind of make this assessment. Is this something which is reasonable to assume, or is this something that, this was presumptuous, and therefore I don't have to correct the person who made that assumption. So let's just try to discuss a couple cases and see how they'll fit in. Particularly when it comes to this last case, there was Rosh Weiss was asked this shaila. It's a common scenario in many different forms. Someone's traveling to visit their family, or they have another simcha, and they hear about a second simcha, or a second event that's going on. So they live in Indianapolis, and they travel to New York because their brother has an important, their brother made a simcha, or they have a family event, or whatever it is, or they're going to visit. And then they also have like a more distant friend that is having a simcha at the same time, having an event, a wedding. So while they're there, they go. You could have a less extreme case, someone traveled an hour, there's two events going on in the city at the same time. You could have a case where someone showed up at a wedding and the person saw him and thought that he came for him. Really, he was coming for the other side, right? He didn't realize that that he's actually close with the other side, and that's really the reason why he was there. And in all these cases, the Baal Simcha, the person who's making the event, comes and says, "Oh, I'm so happy that you came. It means so much that you traveled all the way here. It means the world to me." And the question that Rosh Weiss was asked is that, do you have to correct him? Is this an issue of Geneivas Daas? What does everyone think?
I would say it's normal. It's normal to expect that if someone came to your simcha, they're coming for you. I don't think he's assuming anything.
So you would think you have to correct him.
Yeah, I guess.
Be a little awkward. It was a little awkward in the case of Mar Zutra, but Rav Safra thought that he had to do it, so he did it. Now in that case,
I think it happened.
in that case, he was wrong. Now Chaim, you're making a distinction. You're saying that in the case in the Gemara, where basically these two rabbis were just leaving the city, so you're saying that's a little bit more presumptuous because there's a lot of reasons why a person can leave a city. They were just traveling, so they could have been leaving the city because they're traveling,
I guess,
right? Anytime they're driving, leaving, whatever it is. But you're saying if someone shows up at your wedding, your child's wedding, so you're saying that's going to be a little worse, that they have a right to assume. You're saying it's not presumptuous to assume that they're there for you.
But then on the other side, I would say that if, in other words, it is possible that there could have been certain circumstances where the person would have anyway come.
Right.
So.
Right. So that definitely gets into a gray area. I want to come back to that in a second. There's definitely, I think, room to distinguish between different events and probably maybe get a little bit technical. But just to clarify, is it pashut, is it clear that one is required to inform the other person even though it's going to cause them distress? This question is very similar to one that it became a famous discussion in the laws of Lashon Hara, that if a person said Lashon Hara, bad-mouthed someone else behind their back, so they did something against this person. Mm-hmm. Now, the law is generally, and when it comes to matters between Bein Adam u'Chaver, when it comes between man and his fellow, that you can't do tshuva, you can't do repentance just by asking God. You have to get forgiveness from that person, right? So the question was, well, if you tell them, you're going to cause them great distress. You tell them, I said this terrible thing about you, please forgive me. So there seems to be a Rabbeinu Yonah and Shari Tshuva that says that's what you have to do, because you need to ask, you need to get mechila. Your requirement is that you have to get mechila. The only way you could get mechila is if you tell him what you did wrong. And there's a famous piece from Rabbi Yisrael Salanter that says that you cannot tell him at the expense of causing someone else pain. You cannot ask him for mechila, a similar type of attention that you have in that case as over here. So the question is, can you inform someone of something? Can you not inform them because it will cause them pain? Can you avoid informing them? If you tell them, no, I didn't really care about you, that's not really the reason why I did it, I didn't really do this for you, I wouldn't really have come, which is the honest truth, is there room to change a little bit, be a little bit deceptive in order to save this person from distress?
What's the ikar issue with being deceptive? Like,
Oh.
if it's not, unless, like, I could see if it's attached to something monetary, like you're expecting him to give you a favor back or something.
Very good. Very good. So that really does make a very big impact over here, and it's not very clear. The Ritva says that Geneivas Daas is, and the Svarno says the same thing, is included in lo signovu. It's a product of lo signovu. It's not the main thing that the pasuk is talking about. The Saras Hadibros is talking about kidnapping. Rashi explains exactly what it's talking about. It's not even talking about regular theft. But they understand that it is an assur daraisa, and it is a product. The Ritva writes it explicitly that it's an assur daraisa, and it's a product of Geneva. The Rambam seems to break it up into two categories. Monetary cases, which are not really similar to the cases that we spoke about so much, but more sales where a person gives off a deception and a sale without causing a monetary loss, but is still a deception within a sale, like some of the cases that we mentioned. And then the Ram talks about these types of cases in Halachos Deus. And Halachos Deus is really the Rambam's, I guess we could call it the Rambam's Musar book, or the Rambam's Midos book, about character, about the proper character that a person should develop, that a Jew should develop. And the Rambam puts it in there, and he starts off introducing it by saying a person should be tochel kabaro. A person should be completely honest. They're inside like they're outside, outside like they're inside. And the Rambam then goes into these halachos. That's his introduction into these halachos, not to give off this impression when it's really that way, not to deceive. Basically, going through these cases in the Gemara, it seems pretty clear from the Rambam that it's not a Geneva issue; it's a emes issue, right? The same way that it's assur to lie, which requires discussion exactly where that prohibition comes from, but is clearly something which is not Ratzon Hashem, something which is clearly bad, so it comes from Sheker. Now, Chaim's point is very important because we find, especially in the past couple of Parshios, we find that there are exceptions, right? There are times where dishonesty or hiding the truth is the proper thing. Chazal talk about three things that you're allowed to lie for. We see Yaakov Avinu took measures of deception that were necessary. So you could hear a strong argument that maybe you're not required to cause someone distress. If your motive is to avoid the distress of someone, then maybe that should be a heter. And Rav Asher Weiss toys with this and seems to consider this a strong possibility that if your motive is really to avoid him being in pain, then that would be okay. What I struggle with is that it's very hard in this Gemara, right? In this Gemara with Mar Zutra, Rav Safra didn't know the heter of Yehuda Kamatia Nafshi. Rav Safra didn't know that distinction between whether it was presumptuous or not presumptuous. He didn't know that heter, that if the other party is making an assumption that is not, we'll call a reasonable assumption, then he doesn't have to inform him. And when he didn't know that heter, he went ahead and he told Mar Zutra. He told him, we didn't really come from you. And he was embarrassed. He said, I'm embarrassed to say this, we would have really, we hold the world of you, and we would have come. But we didn't. Now he knew that would be an embarrassing thing to say. There was Mar Zutra assuming that they came for him. He knew that would be embarrassing, and he did it anyway. So Rava's only response to him is that there was a different heter, that it was presumptuous, right? But if it doesn't come into that heter that the other party was presumptuous, it seems like he would have had to tell him. It seems like it would have been justified that he told him, even though he caused him distress. So I have a hard time how to work out this Gemara. It seems very, very similar to the case that we're discussing with, appearing at someone's simcha or at someone's event. So that's a heter that he discusses. He doesn't say it with such conviction, but he seems to hold of it, and it's hard for me to really work within this Gemara, which this idea is brought in Shulchan Aruch. The other way to approach it, which really will be dependent on a case by case basis, is what Chaim mentioned before, is that depending on the case, many cases a person is being presumptuous. For sure, we could be mechalik between a simcha in Lakewood and a simcha in Indianapolis. If you find someone at your simcha in Lakewood, there on any given night are 5 or 10 or 20 other reasons to be in Lakewood that night. Forget about a simcha. There are many other reasons for any from Jew to be in Lakewood on any given night. To assume that someone came special for your simcha at a simcha in Lakewood potentially is presumptuous. Potentially. Now, if you're making a simcha in Indianapolis, there's not as many yet. There's not as many reasons for from Jew to be coming to Indianapolis. Now, there's people coming for business and different things, but they show up at your simcha that you're making here, or, we don't have to give such extreme examples. I'm just bringing out the point. There's a strong assumption. There's no reason for them to assume that you're there for another reason. So that is a big heter. Rav Asher Weiss wants to take it a little further, that maybe there's not, they should assume, at any given simcha, you don't know, maybe they have a relationship with the other side. That itself is presumptuous, to assume that they're not there because of the other side. So definitely there's different kalukim you can make, and each case has to be judged on a case by case basis. But that's the general principle that we're trying to figure out when it comes to these cases: was there an assumption that was right or not right? Just to go through some other very, very quickly, just to bring out where we have other cases of Geneivas Daas. Ramosha Feinstein was asked about yeshivas or Jewish institutions putting out numbers which were incorrect in order to get higher government grants. And he says, of course, it's assur to do that. He says it's Geneivas Daas to give off incorrect information, and even he adds other prohibitions that it also has, but that would be a typical example of Geneivas Daas. Another case is tests. Person using information that he shouldn't have had, getting someone else to write the essay for him and presenting it in his name. So he's implying, right, ChatGPT, a lot of different ways that a person can imply.
Or
Plagiarism. These are all classic examples of Geneivas Daas. Ramosha says that's the first assur over when it comes to obtaining degrees or scores or things based on false information. That's Geneivas Daas. Depending on the case, he says if a person gets a job through it, it could be real Geneva or different things. But for sure, Geneivas Daas is a classic example. There's another interesting case. It was common that it still is common that there are certain kibudim that a person wants to get based on what's going on. Like, for example, a chassan gets an aliyah. A person who's having a child, they want to do psicha. So it used to be they would bid. Some places are that they bid, but some places they would bid every week. And the Yosef Ometz was asked that the shul wanted to increase their funds. So someone wanted to, basically, they knew this guy was, his son was a chassan, and he had to buy him aliyah. Everyone's going to buy an aliyah for their son that's a chassan. Or this person is their wife is in the 9th month, and they're going to, for sure, buy psicha. So one of the, people on the board of the shul said, okay, I have a good idea. This guy has the means, so let's bump him up. So I'll just keep bidding higher and higher. So he tells the guy before, you should know I'm not actually committing to all the money that I'm going to be getting. This is just, a gimmick that I'm doing in order to raise the shul funds. And Plony, he's going to buy psicha at a very high price. So he offers 100, I'll offer 200, it'll go 300, and this way the shul will make a lot of money. They'll keep track of who needs to buy what at each particular time, and the shul funds will increase. So the Yosef Omitz is very, very upset with this idea. He says that this is grade A Geneivas Daas, and this is a terrible, terrible way for the shul to increase their funds. He says it's completely antithetical to everything that we believe in and everything that we do. This is another example of Geneivas Daas. So we'll stop with that for now. Maybe we'll get some feedback over the week. People will think of creative cases. Maybe we'll talk about it more. Shkai for coming.